My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 33 years old. 3 months ago, my mother-in-law placed a cream-colored folder in the center of her dining table, looked straight at my husband, and said, "Evan, you deserve to know the truth." Inside that folder was a DNA report for our 4-year-old daughter. My mother-in-law had taken a sample from my child without my permission, sent it to a private lab, and arranged an entire family dinner around what she believed would be the end of my marriage. She thought the papers would prove that my daughter was not Evan's. She thought everyone at that table would finally see me the way she had always wanted them to see me, as a liar, an outsider, a woman who had tricked her precious son. But she did not know one thing. I had known about the test for 12 days. I had known long enough to prepare, long enough to document, long enough to learn that the truth she was so desperate to expose was not mine at all. It was hers. And by the end of that dinner, the same folder she brought to destroy my family revealed the secret she had buried for 38 years. Before I take you to that table, I need to take you back to the first time I met Vivian Whitmore. It was 8 years earlier, on a cold November afternoon, and I remember the exact sound of her front door opening. Not a warm swing of hinges, not the cheerful rush of a mother eager to meet the woman her son loved. It opened slowly, deliberately, like she had already decided I was a package she had not ordered. Evan and I had been together for 5 months. He was calm, practical, generous in the quiet ways that matter. He remembered the small things. He filled my gas tank when he borrowed my car. He left coffee beside my laptop when I worked late. He called my mother Mrs. Larkin until she laughed and told him to stop acting like she was grading him. When he told me his parents wanted to meet me, I thought I was nervous in the normal way. I had no idea I was walking into an audition I would never pass. Vivian stood in the doorway wearing a navy dress, pearls, and the kind of smile that never reached the muscles around her eyes. She did not hug me. She looked me over once from my boots to my hair, then offered me her hand. "Claire," she said, as if testing the name for cracks. "Evan has told us about you." Behind her, Evan's father, Thomas, appeared with a softer face and tired eyes. He welcomed me inside, took my coat, and made a joke about how Vivian had made enough food for a wedding reception. I laughed because that was what polite people did. Dinner was roasted chicken, green beans, potatoes cut into perfect little squares, and a silence that kept pretending it was conversation. Vivian asked where I worked. I told her I was a pediatric speech therapist. She nodded, then asked where I had gone to school. I answered. She asked where my family was from. I told her my mother had grown up in Vermont and my father had been from Rhode Island. "Had been?" she asked. I set my fork down. "He left when I was 7. We haven't had a relationship since I was a teenager." Vivian's fingers moved to her pearls. She rolled one between her thumb and index finger. It was the first time I noticed that gesture. Later, I would understand it meant she was filing something away. "That must have shaped you," she said, not kindly, clinically, like she had just marked a weakness on a chart. On the drive home, Evan squeezed my knee and said, "She liked you more than she likes most people." I looked out the passenger window at the dark road and the porch lights passing in yellow blurs. "That was her liking me," he gave a nervous laugh. "My mom takes time." I did not say what I was already thinking. Some people do not take time. They take inventory. Evan and I married the following September in a small garden behind an old inn near the coast. My mother cried through the entire ceremony. Thomas cried when Evan said his vows. Vivian wore pale champagne, close enough to white that 3 people mentioned it, but far enough that she could act wounded if anyone called it deliberate. I decided not to care. That day, I believed love was a house we were building, and if the foundation was strong enough, No one outside it could do much damage. I was wrong. A house can be strong and still be invaded through a door someone else keeps opening. For the first year, Vivian's interference came disguised as help. She dropped by without calling because she had extra soup. She reorganized our pantry because the way you had it made no sense. She returned curtains I had bought and replaced them with heavier ones because Evan always liked proper drapes. She brought framed photos of Evan as a child and placed them on our shelves, moving my family photos to make room. Every time I objected, Evan looked uncomfortable and said, "She means well." That phrase became a small prison. She means well. She means well. She means well. People can mean well and still cross lines. People can mean well and still hurt you. But Evan had been raised to believe his mother's intentions mattered more than anyone else's discomfort. His younger sister, Melanie, was worse in a different way. She was 27, still living 10 minutes from Vivian, still calling her 3 times a day, still repeating her opinions as if they had come from her own independent mind. Melanie was pretty, restless, and addicted to being included in every family emotion. If Vivian raised an eyebrow, Melanie turned it into a speech. If Vivian sighed, Melanie turned it into a moral crisis. At Christmas, when Evan gave me a simple gold bracelet, Melanie laughed and said, "Wow, Claire, you really upgraded him. He used to forget birthdays." Vivian did not laugh. She just looked at my wrist and said, "Evan has always been generous when he feels responsible." Responsible. Not in love, not happy. Responsible. That was how she planted things. Small words, soft voice, no fingerprints. Then Amelia was born. Our daughter arrived at 3, 18 on a rainy Monday morning after 18 hours of labor and one emergency I still cannot talk about without feeling my body remember it. She came out furious, red-faced, alive, and louder than any sound I had ever loved. Evan sobbed when he held her. Not cried. Sobbed. Thomas came to the hospital with a stuffed rabbit and hands that shook when he touched her tiny foot. Vivian arrived 2 hours later with a monogrammed blanket, leaned over the bassinet and said, "There she is, a Whitmore girl." For one brief moment, I let myself hope. I thought maybe a baby would soften the sharp edges. Maybe motherhood would make Vivian recognize something human in me. Maybe Amelia would be loved so fiercely that all the old judgments would lose their power. For the first few months, Vivian was almost gentle. She brought meals. She folded laundry. She told Evan he needed to let me sleep. She held Amelia against her shoulder and hummed old songs under her breath. I watched them sometimes and felt guilty for not trusting it. But trust is not a switch. It is a history, and ours already had too many shadows. When Amelia was 6 months old, her hair began to change. She had been born with dark brown hair like Evan S., but slowly, strand by strand, it lightened. By 9 months, it had warmed into a deep copper. By her first birthday, she had thick auburn curls that glowed in sunlight. My mother cried when she saw them because her own mother had had the same hair. We had old photos. My grandmother in a green dress with copper curls pinned loosely at the back of her neck. My great-grandfather with a reddish beard, a family trait that appeared, vanished, then returned like a secret skipping stones across generations. To me, Amelia's hair was not suspicious. It was inheritance. It was history. It was proof that family does not always announce itself in obvious ways. Vivian saw it differently. At Amelia's first birthday party, Vivian lifted one of my daughter's curls between 2 fingers and said, "Well, isn't that unusual?" She looked at Evan, then at me, then back at the curl. "Where exactly does this come from?" I explained my mother's side. I mentioned recessive genes, old photos, my grandmother. Vivian smiled with her mouth only. "How interesting," she said, "because no one in our family has hair like that." She released the curl as if it had disappointed her. The comments began there, quiet and spaced far enough apart that anyone could call me sensitive if I reacted. "Amelia is such a distinctive child. Her coloring is so unlike Evan S. Are you sure there is Irish somewhere on your side? Funny how children can surprise us." At a summer barbecue, Melanie posted a photo of Amelia eating watermelon on Vivian's lawn and captioned it, "Our little mystery girl." When I showed Evan, he frowned but said, "Mel probably didn't mean anything." I asked him, "Then what did she mean?" He had no answer. I started writing things down, not because I planned revenge, because I needed reality to stay solid. When someone undermines you softly, repeatedly, in front of other people, you begin to question whether the pattern is real or whether you are the problem. Documentation became my anchor. March 12, Vivian asked whether Amelia looked like anyone we know. April 3, Melanie said Amelia's hair was a plot twist. May 19, Vivian told Aunt Rochelle that genetics were funny things while looking directly at me. I wrote dates. I wrote witnesses. I wrote exact words when I could remember them. At work, I taught children how to use language after injury, delay, trauma, or silence. At home, I was learning how dangerous language could be when used by adults who knew exactly what they were doing. The first public accusation came at Easter when Amelia was 3. We were at Vivian and Thomas's house. The dining room smelled like glazed ham and lilies. Amelia wore a white dress with tiny blue flowers and kept running from the table to show everyone the plastic eggs she had found in the yard. Thomas clapped every time. Evan smiled so hard his face changed shape. Vivian watched our daughter with an expression I could not read. Then Aunt Rochelle said, "That child is beautiful. Those curls are something else." Vivian put down her wine glass and said, "Yes, they certainly are. I keep saying she does not resemble the Whitmores at all." The table went still. Melanie added, "I looked through Mom's old albums. Not one redhead, not one." There it was, not a question, not an accusation with a name. Something worse, an invitation for everyone else to wonder. I looked at Evan. He stared at his plate. His face was pale. He said nothing. The silence hurt more than Vivian's words because Vivian had always been Vivian. Evan was supposed to be my home. On the drive back, Amelia slept in the back seat with chocolate on her sleeve. I said, "The next time your mother suggests our daughter is not yours, I will not sit quietly." Evan swallowed. "I'll talk to her." I looked at him. "You said that after Christmas." "I know. You said it after Melanie's post." "Claire, I know. But knowing is not doing." And by then, I was beginning to understand that Evan had spent his whole life surviving Vivian by waiting for storms to pass. I could not raise my daughter inside his weather pattern. The sample was taken on a Thursday. I know because that morning I dropped Amelia at Vivian's house before work. My clinic had a full schedule, and Amelia's preschool was closed for a staff training day. I packed her pink water bottle, a change of clothes, her little fox sweater, grapes cut in half, and the purple toothbrush she insisted on carrying everywhere that week because preschool had done a lesson about teeth. When I picked her up at 5, the toothbrush was gone. "Oh, that," Vivian said, too quickly. "It fell behind the bathroom trash can. I threw it away. Germs." Something in her voice made my skin tighten. Not the words, the ease of them. The way she had the answer ready before I had fully asked the question. As I lifted Amelia's coat from the chair, I noticed a small plastic bag near Vivian's purse. Clear, sealed with something purple inside. Vivian saw my eyes move and immediately covered it with a folded newspaper. "Coupons," she said. I looked at her. She looked back. For a second, the whole room held its breath. Then Amelia tugged my sleeve and asked for her fox sweater, and the moment passed. On the drive home, I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself no one would actually take a child's DNA without parental permission because of hair color and family gossip. But there are lies we tell ourselves because the truth would require action before we are ready. 9 days later, the truth called me at work. I was in the therapy room cleaning picture cards when my phone vibrated. The number was unfamiliar but local. I almost ignored it. Then I thought of the purple toothbrush and stepped into the hallway. "Mrs. Whitmore?" a woman asked. "This is Angela from Northbridge Genetic Services. I'm calling regarding a minor child sample submitted under the name Amelia Rose Whitmore." My hand tightened around the phone. "I didn't submit a sample." There was a pause. Paper rustled. The request was initiated by Vivian Whitmore, listed as grandmother. However, our policy requires consent from a parent or legal guardian before processing any sample belonging to a minor. The hallway light seemed suddenly too bright. I asked her to repeat everything. She did, calmly, professionally, like she made these calls every day and did not know she had just opened the floor beneath me. "Would you like to authorize processing or cancel the test?" she asked. I said, "Cancel it immediately." "And flag my child's name. No further testing without my written authorization." My voice did not shake. My hands did. I stood in the staff restroom for 6 minutes afterward. I know because I watched the digital clock above the paper towel dispenser. 6 minutes to feel the rage. 6 minutes to let it move through my body without letting it drive. Then I washed my hands, returned to the therapy room, and finished my day. A 5-year-old boy named Mateo said his first complete sentence that afternoon after months of fragments. "I want blue cup," his mother cried. I smiled, praised him, wrote the progress note, and thought, children fight so hard to be heard, while adults use silence like a weapon. That evening, after Amelia fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and called a family attorney named Priya Shah. She had been recommended by a colleague after a custody dispute. I expected advice. What I got was a strategy. Priya listened as I described the comments, the toothbrush, the lab call, the family dinners, the years of insinuation. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she said, "Claire, what your mother-in-law attempted is not just inappropriate. It is a violation of your child's privacy and your parental rights. Do not confront her yet." I stared at the notebook in front of me. Why not? Because people like this do not stop when privately embarrassed. They stop when the pattern becomes undeniable. If she believes she has results, she may reveal them herself. Let her create witnesses. I was silent. Priya continued, "Document everything. Save the call log. Ask the lab for written confirmation that the sample was submitted and stopped for lack of consent. And do not warn Evan yet if you believe he will warn her." That last part hurt because it was true. For 12 days, I carried the knowledge alone. It is strange how ordinary life continues when something inside you has split open. I made oatmeal. I packed lunches. I matched socks. I helped children at work practice words like more, help, open, home. I read Amelia the same bedtime story about a moon rabbit 4 nights in a row. Evan kissed my forehead and asked why I was quiet. I said I was tired. It was not entirely a lie. I was exhausted from pretending the floor was still solid. On the 4th day, I received the email from Northbridge. It confirmed that a sample had been received under Amelia's name, submitted by Vivian Whitmore and placed on hold pending parental authorization. It also included a scanned intake form. The signature line for parent or guardian had not been signed with my name. It had been checked electronically with a box stating that the submitter had authority to request testing. Vivian had lied with a click. I saved the email, printed it, sent it to Priya, added it to a folder on my laptop labeled Amelia Documentation. On the 6th day, I learned Vivian had not stopped with Northbridge. Melanie accidentally told me without knowing she had done it. I had gone to Vivian's house to pick up Amelia's fox sweater, which had been left there after the toothbrush day. Vivian was at the salon. Melanie answered the door, phone pressed to her ear. She waved me in and kept talking as if I were furniture. "Mom says Sunday will settle it," she said. "She has the ancestry thing and the private report. She wants everyone there before dessert." I stopped in the hallway, one hand on the sweater. Melanie laughed at something the person on the phone said. "I know it's going to be brutal, but honestly, Evan needs proof." My stomach went cold. I walked back into the living room. Melanie saw me and ended the call so fast she nearly dropped the phone. "Oh, hey, I didn't know you were still here." I held up the sweater. "Got it." She smiled too brightly. "Great, see you Sunday." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. In the car, I sat with the sweater in my lap and stared at Vivian's perfect front porch. She had planned a dinner, not a conversation, not an apology, a reveal. She wanted an audience. She wanted my humiliation witnessed and preserved in family memory. She had spent years turning suspicion into atmosphere. Now she believed she had enough to make it official. That night, I searched the consumer ancestry site Melanie had mentioned. Vivian had used one of those platforms where people submit DNA and receive family matches. I did not hack anything. I did not need to. Vivian had used an email address Evan knew because it was the same one she used for everything, and her password hint was the name of her first dog. Evan had once told me that story during a road trip. I should not have logged in. I know that. But my child's DNA was there, uploaded without consent, and I needed to know what damage had been done. When the account opened, I saw Amelia's profile. My daughter's name. My daughter's age. My daughter's genetic information reduced to tabs and percentages and matches that no grandmother had the right to see. The paternity result, attached from a partner service, said Evan was Amelia's biological father with 99.999% probability. I stared at it for a long time, not because I doubted it. I had never doubted it. I stared because Vivian had already seen this. She knew the result did not prove what she wanted, and she was still planning Sunday dinner. That meant either she had convinced herself the report was wrong, or she had found something else she thought she could twist. Then I clicked the relatives tab. The first close match was not Evan. It was a man named Julian R., 38, Seattle, Washington. Predicted relationship to Amelia, half-uncle or close equivalent. I read it once, twice. Then I leaned back and felt the room tilt. A half-uncle meant Julian shared one biological parent with Evan, or with me. But I had not submitted my DNA. Amelia's connection to Julian had to come through Evan's side. Either Thomas had a child no one knew about, or Vivian did. I took screenshots of everything. Julian's profile said he had been adopted as an infant through a private agency in Boston. He wrote, "Searching for biological family. No pressure, just hoping to understand where I came from." He had kind eyes in his photo, a square jaw like Evan S., and the same slight dimple in his chin that Amelia had when she smiled. I did the math. Julian was 38. Vivian would have been 21 when he was born. She married Thomas 3 years later. Evan was born the year after that. 38 years of silence sat on my screen. I sent the screenshots to Priya. She called 15 minutes later. "Do not contact Julian," she said first. "That part is not yours to initiate unless Evan chooses it later." I know, but save everything. If Vivian presents this test publicly, she opens the door to the entire report, including the match. I heard her take a breath. "Claire, are you prepared for what this may do to your husband?" I looked toward the living room, where Evan was asleep on the couch with Amelia curled against his side. Her copper curls were spread across his gray t-shirt. His hand rested protectively on her back even in sleep. "No," I said, "but I'm prepared for what happens if we keep living under his mother's lies." Sunday came with a strange, bright calm. I dressed Amelia in a soft green dress because green made her hair look like firelight. She spun in front of the hallway mirror and asked if she looked like a forest fairy. I told her she looked like magic. Evan wore a blue button-down and asked, "Do you know why Mom is making such a big deal about dinner?" I tied Amelia's shoe and said, "I think she has something she wants to say." He frowned. "Should I be worried?" I looked at him, my good husband, my conflict-avoiding husband, the man who loved me but had not yet learned that love sometimes needs a spine. "Yes," I said softly, "but not about me." Vivian's house was already full when we arrived. Thomas's truck was in the driveway. Melanie's little white SUV was parked crookedly near the mailbox. Aunt Rochelle's sedan sat beneath the maple tree. Evan's cousin Bate was there, too, which told me Vivian wanted maximum witnesses. The house smelled like roast beef, rosemary, and lemon polish. Vivian opened the door wearing a cream blouse, pearls, and victory. She hugged Evan too long. She kissed Amelia on the top of her head and touched one curl. "Look at you," she said, "always so surprising." I smiled. "Vivian." She gave me a nod, not a greeting, a warning. The folder was on the sideboard in the dining room. Cream-colored, thick, waiting. Dinner was a performance of normality so strained it almost became comedy. Thomas talked about replacing a fence post. Rochelle asked Bate about work. Melanie barely touched her food and checked her phone every minute. Vivian poured wine, passed rolls, asked questions, smiled at all the right places. She was glowing, not happy, charged, like a person standing beside a fuse she had already lit. I watched Evan. He sensed something but did not know where to place it. Twice, he looked at me as if asking silently whether I knew what was happening. I held his gaze both times. I wanted him to understand that I was not afraid. Hurt, yes. Angry, yes. But not afraid. After the plates were cleared, and before dessert, Vivian stood. Aunt Rochelle closed her eyes for half a second. I saw it. Thomas looked confused. Melanie sat straighter. Bates' smile vanished. Evan turned toward his mother slowly. "There is something this family needs to address," Vivian said. Her voice was calm, polished, almost ceremonial. "I have hesitated because I did not want to hurt anyone, but sometimes truth is painful, and avoiding it only makes the damage worse." She walked to the sideboard and picked up the folder. "Evan, I think you need to see this." The room went silent. "What is that?" Evan asked. Vivian placed the folder in front of him. "A DNA report." Thomas's chair scraped back. "Vivian, what did you do?" She ignored him. Her eyes were on me. I did what no one else had the courage to do. I asked a question that should have been asked a long time ago. Evan did not touch the folder. "What question?" Vivian's face softened into fake sorrow. whether Amelia is truly yours. There are sentences that do not merely enter a room, they damage it. That one did. Bate put a hand over her mouth. Thomas stared at his wife as if she had become someone else in front of him. Melanie looked at me, then away. Evan's face emptied. Vivian continued, encouraged by the silence. I know this is difficult, but that child does not resemble our family. The hair, the coloring, the features. I have tried to be delicate, but I will not pretend anymore. You deserve certainty. For a moment, no one moved. Then Evan picked up the folder. I watched his hands, they were steady. He opened it, pulled out the first pages, and read. 15 seconds passed. 30. Vivian's smile began to strain. Evan turned the page. His jaw tightened. Then he looked up. She's mine, he said. Vivian blinked. What? Evan's voice changed. It was still quiet, but it had weight now. Amelia is my daughter. The report says biological paternity is confirmed. No, Vivian said, not loudly, like the word had escaped without permission. That can't be right. Evan held up the page. It is right. Melanie leaned forward. Maybe the test. Don't, Evan said. One word. It stopped her completely. Vivian reached for the folder. Let me see. Evan pulled it away. You stole my daughter's DNA. I protected you. You stole my daughter's DNA, he repeated, and this time his voice cracked. You took something from my child's body because you wanted to prove my wife betrayed me. Vivian's hand went to her pearls. There it was, the old gesture, the little roll of control. But the room had shifted and she could feel it. She looked at Thomas. I was trying to protect our family. Thomas stood slowly. He was not a dramatic man. He had spent most of his marriage letting Vivian lead, correct, decide, explain. But his face at that moment was not passive. It was devastated. You tested our granddaughter behind their backs. Vivian opened her mouth, but I spoke first. The lab called me 12 days ago, I said. Every head turned toward me. I kept my voice even. Northbridge required parental authorization. Vivian did not have it. They contacted me to confirm consent. I canceled the test and requested written documentation. I looked at Vivian. You had no legal or moral right to submit Amelia's DNA. Vivian's face flushed. You knew. Yes. Evan turned toward me. There was pain in his eyes, but not accusation. Not yet. Confusion. Shock. Claire. I reached into my bag and placed my own folder on the table. I knew about Northbridge. Then I learned about the Ancestry account. I looked at Vivian again. And that is where your problem begins. The silence deepened. Vivian's lips parted. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Aunt Rochelle whispered, Claire. That whisper told me everything. Rochelle knew. Maybe not all of it, but enough. The secret had not been carried by Vivian alone. Evan slowly looked back at the report. What Ancestry account? Page 6, I said. He turned pages. The paper sounded too loud in the room. He found the relatives section. His eyes moved across the text, then stopped. Predicted close relative, he read. Julian R. age 38. Seattle, Washington. Relationship estimate, half-uncle or equivalent. He looked at me. What does that mean? It means Julian shares a parent with someone on your side of Amelia's family. Evan looked at Thomas. Thomas looked bewildered. Then both of them looked at Vivian. Vivian had gone white. Evan's voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom, who is Julian?" Vivian shook her head. "I don't know." Aunt Rochelle stood abruptly. "Vive, don't lie, not now." Thomas turned toward Rochelle. "What did you just say?" Rochelle's eyes filled with tears. She looked older suddenly, smaller. "I told her this would come back one day." The room cracked open. Evan stood. "Mom, who is Julian?" Vivian gripped the back of her chair. Her pearls trembled against her throat. For the first time since I had known her, she looked truly afraid. Not offended, not insulted, afraid. "He was before Thomas," she said. Thomas did not move. Vivian swallowed. "I was 21. My parents were strict. I wasn't married. The father was gone before I knew I was pregnant. My mother said no decent man would ever marry me if people found out. They arranged everything. A private adoption. I held him once." Her voice broke. "I held him once and then they took him." No one spoke. For one terrible moment, I felt my anger bend under the weight of her grief. Because that story was real. I could hear it. A young woman, terrified, controlled by parents, forced into shame. A baby placed in someone else's arms. A life divided into before and after. Pain like that does not vanish. It calcifies. It becomes rules, judgments, fears, obsessions. I could almost feel compassion taking shape. Then Vivian looked at me and said, "And Claire used it to ruin me." The compassion died. Evan stepped between us. "No, you don't get to do that." Vivian flinched. "You brought the folder," he said. "You planned the dinner. You accused my wife in front of my family. You violated my daughter. And now that the truth points back at you, you want to blame Claire." "I was ashamed," Vivian whispered. "You were ashamed, so you shamed my wife." "I thought." "You thought Amelia's hair exposed something," he said, "but it exposed you." That was when Bate, who had been silent the entire time, said, "Wait." Her voice was hesitant but clear. "Aunt Vivian, your hair was red, wasn't it?" Vivian turned sharply. "What?" Bate looked at Rochelle. "I remember a picture at Grandma's house. Vivian on the beach. She had red hair." Rochelle covered her face. Thomas stared at his wife. "Your hair." Vivian's hand went to her dyed brown hair. The color was always perfect, always maintained, always the same cool chestnut. Too perfect, too maintained. "It darkened," she said weakly. Rochelle lowered her hands. "No, it didn't. You started coloring it at 19 because your mother said red hair made you look wild." The room seemed to inhale. Evan laughed once, but it was not amusement. It was disbelief sharpened into sound. "You had red hair." Vivian did not answer. "Our daughter has your hair," he said. Vivian closed her eyes. "You spent years implying Claire cheated on me because Amelia inherited something from you." Melanie began crying. "Mom, you told me there was no way it came from us. You told me Claire was hiding something." Vivian sat down hard. "I didn't want that hair in the family again." The sentence was so strange, so small, so revealing, that no one responded at first. Thomas finally spoke. "The hair was never the problem, was it?" Vivian looked at him. "It reminded you," he said. His voice was quiet and destroyed. Every time you saw Amelia, you remembered the baby you gave away, and instead of telling the truth, you punished Claire. Vivian wept then, real tears, not the controlled moisture she used when Evan disappointed her, not the trembling performance she had perfected over decades. These tears bent her forward, but the damage had already been done. Tears can express pain. They cannot erase harm. Evan closed the folder. We're leaving. Vivian reached for him. Please, Evan, please don't take her from me. He stepped back. You took from her first. I went upstairs to get Amelia. She had fallen asleep in the guest room with her stuffed fox under one arm. Her curls were spread across the pillow, copper and gold under the bedside lamp. For a second, I stood there and let myself breathe. This child had been turned into evidence by a woman who could not face her own past. But Amelia was not evidence. She was not a question. She was not a mirror for Vivian's shame. She was a little girl who loved moon stories, hated peas, called every squirrel sir, and thought her hair was magic. I lifted her gently. She stirred and whispered, Mommy. I've got you, baby. Downstairs, Thomas stood near the front door with his coat in his hand. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years during dessert. Rochelle was crying quietly. Melanie was wiping mascara from under her eyes. Vivian remained at the table, one hand over the folder, as if touching it could undo what it had done. At the door, she said, Claire. I turned. For 7 years, I had wanted this woman to see me, not as a threat, not as a flaw in her family design, as a person, as a wife, as Amelia's mother. That night, she finally looked at me, but it was too late for the kind of understanding that prevents damage. Now there could only be consequences. I loved her, Vivian said, looking at Amelia asleep against my shoulder. I do love her. I believe you, I said, but love without boundaries becomes possession, and you do not get to possess my child. Evan opened the car door for me. I buckled Amelia into her seat. She mumbled something about her fox, and I tucked it under her hand. The house behind us glowed warm in the windows, the way houses do when they are pretending nothing inside them has burned. We drove for several minutes before Evan spoke. How long did you know about Julian? 6 days. His hands tightened on the wheel. And the test? 12. He nodded slowly. I could feel the hurt in him, not because I had done wrong, but because the truth had reached me before it reached him. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at the road ahead. Because I needed you to see her clearly. If I had told you, you would have called her. She would have cried. You would have asked me to let it go because she was embarrassed. And we would have spent the next 10 years pretending she hadn't violated our daughter. He did not deny it. That silence was the beginning of his honesty. Finally, he said, I hate that you were right. I hate that I had to be. He reached across the console and took my hand. His palm was warm. His grip was unsteady at first, then firm. I'm sorry, he said, for Easter, for Melanie's posts, for every time I asked you to understand instead of asking her to stop. I looked at him then, really looked. He was not fixed. Our marriage was not magically repaired because one dinner had exploded, but something essential had shifted. He was no longer standing between his mother and the truth, trying to soften the collision. He was standing beside me in the wreckage. The following week was not peaceful. Truth does not arrive with peace. It arrives with phone calls, crying, denial, blame, logistics, and people rewriting their own memories in real time. On Monday, Vivian called Evan 14 times. He answered once. I heard his side from the kitchen. No, Mom, you are not coming over. No, you are not speaking to Amelia right now. No, Claire did not manipulate me. You need to speak to a therapist and an attorney. Those are not suggestions. Then he hung up and sat at the table with his head in his hands. On Tuesday, Thomas came over. He stood on our porch holding a paper bag of muffins because he had no idea what else to bring. Amelia ran to him shouting, "Grandpa Tom!" And he knelt so quickly his knee cracked. He held her and cried into her hair. Later, while she colored in the living room, he sat with us at the kitchen table and said, I can forgive a scared girl for what happened before me. I don't know if I can forgive the woman who lied to me every day after. He looked at Evan. A secret that old becomes part of the marriage. I don't know what's real right now. Evan reached across the table and put a hand on his father's shoulder. For once, neither man tried to solve anything. On Wednesday, Melanie sent me a message that began with "I didn't know" and ended with, "But I should have known better than to help her hurt you." I read it 3 times. Then I wrote back, "Thank you for saying that. I need time." It was not forgiveness. It was a door left unlocked but not open. On Thursday, Priya sent Vivian a formal letter demanding that she delete any consumer DNA profiles connected to Amelia, provide confirmation of deletion, preserve all related communications, and cease any attempt to obtain genetic, medical, school, or personal records concerning our daughter. Evan read the letter twice. I should have been the one to stop it before it got here, he said. I answered honestly. Yes. He closed his eyes. Then he nodded. That was another beginning. On Friday night, Evan searched for Julian. I found him at the kitchen table long after Amelia was asleep, laptop open, blue light on his face. He's a teacher, Evan said. Middle school history, Seattle, married, 1 son. He turned the screen toward me. Julian's staff photo showed a man with Evan's jaw, Thomas's serious eyes, and Vivian's mouth. A stranger and not a stranger. A person who had existed all this time outside the family story. His profile says he's been looking for his birth mother for 10 years, Evan said. His voice was rough. 10 years, Claire. I sat beside him. What do you want to do? I don't know. So we sat there in the quiet, not knowing together. 2 days later, Evan wrote Julian a message. He typed it, deleted it, walked away, came back, typed again. The final version was simple. My name is Evan Whitmore. I believe we may be half-brothers. I recently learned that my mother gave birth to a child before she married my father. I understand this may be overwhelming. If you are open to talking, I would like to connect. He sent it at 9:42 in the morning. Julian answered before noon. I have waited a long time for this message. Their first video call lasted almost 3 hours. I did not sit beside Evan because some moments belong first to the people whose lives have just been rearranged. I stayed in the living room with Amelia while she built a tower from wooden blocks. But I heard Evan's voice break when Julian said, I used to wonder whether anyone in my biological family ever thought about me. I heard Evan answer, I didn't know you existed, but I'm thinking about you now. Later, when the call ended, Evan came into the living room and sat on the floor. Amelia climbed into his lap. He held her too tightly, then loosened his arms when she complained. Daddy's sad, she asked. He kissed her hair. Daddy is feeling a lot of things. She patted his cheek with the solemn confidence of a 4-year-old. You need snack. He laughed and cried at the same time. Vivian did not meet Julian right away. She wanted to, or said she wanted to, but wanting reunion and being ready for accountability are different things. Julian, to his credit, moved slowly. He spoke with Evan first, then Thomas. Then, weeks later, with Vivian on a video call that left her unable to speak for most of the hour. Julian did not yell. He did not perform forgiveness. He asked questions. What time was I born? Did you name me? Did you hold me? Did my father know? Did you ever look for me? Vivian answered some, could not answer others. When Julian asked, did you think about me on my birthdays? Vivian covered her mouth and sobbed. He waited. Then he said, I needed the truth more than your tears. I was not on that call, but Evan told me afterward, and I wrote those words down because they were the clearest description of the whole disaster. Boundaries changed our family more than the DNA test did. We changed the locks, not dramatically, not to punish, because Vivian had always had a key and access is not the same as trust. We told Amelia that Grandma Vivian was having grown-up time to learn better choices. That was as much truth as a child needed. We did not let Vivian visit alone. We did not accept surprise drop-ins. We did not attend family gatherings where the accusation would be smoothed over for comfort. When Vivian sent gifts, we opened them first. When Melanie posted photos, she asked permission. When relatives called just to hear both sides, Evan handled them. His words became practiced. There are not two sides to taking a child's DNA without parental consent and accusing my wife of infidelity in front of the family. Some people respected it. Some did not. The ones who did not taught us exactly how much distance they needed. 3 months after the dinner, Vivian came to our house by appointment. That alone was new. She stood on the porch holding a small envelope and looking nothing like the woman who had once controlled rooms with a pearl necklace and a raised eyebrow. Her hair had grown out at the roots. Not brown, silver with faint copper underneath. The truth coming through strand by strand. Evan let her in. Amelia was at preschool. That was intentional. This conversation was not for a child. Vivian sat on the edge of our couch. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she handed me the envelope. Inside was a printed confirmation that Amelia's DNA profile had been deleted from the consumer platform. There was also a handwritten letter. Not long, not dramatic. It said, Claire, I violated your daughter's privacy and your motherhood. I accused you because I was afraid of my own past. That does not excuse it. I am sorry. I understand that forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be on your timeline and not mine. I read it twice. The apology did not heal everything. But for the first time, it did not ask me to comfort her. I am in therapy, Vivian said. I should have gone 30 years ago. Evan sat beside me. Yes. She flinched, but she accepted it. I told Julian everything I could, she continued. Not enough, but everything I know. And Amelia, I asked. Vivian's eyes filled. I hurt her by hurting you. Yes. I don't want to lose her. You already lost the version of being her grandmother, where you had unlimited access, I said. What remains depends on whether you can respect limits without turning them into another injury against you. She nodded slowly. I can try. Trying will be measured by behavior, I said. My therapist voice came out then. Calm, exact, not cruel. Not by emotion. Vivian looked at me for a long moment. You would have made a good mother even if Evan had not been Amelia's father, she said. The sentence surprised me. It was awkward, imperfect, but there was something in it that finally separated motherhood from blood in her mind. I nodded once. I know. Winter became spring. Julian visited in April with his wife, Marin, and their little boy, Theo. The first time Evan and Julian stood in our driveway together, I had to look away. Same posture, same half smile, same way of putting hands in pockets when overwhelmed. Amelia studied Julian seriously, then asked if he was Daddy's new brother or old brother. Julian laughed. Both, I think. Theo and Amelia became immediate allies, which mostly meant they dumped every toy basket onto the living room floor and declared themselves firefighters. Thomas met Julian that weekend, too. I was worried it would hurt him, and it did, but it also gave him something truthful to hold. He took Julian to the garage and showed him how to sand a wooden chair he was repairing. They talked for 2 hours. Later, Thomas told me, he lost a mother. I lost the truth. Evan lost the brother he should have known. There's enough grief here for everyone. No point rationing it. That was Thomas. Quiet until he said something that stayed with you. Vivian met Julian in person a month later in a therapist's office. Neutral ground. Evan went with him. Thomas did not. I stayed home with Amelia. When Evan returned, he looked exhausted but lighter. He hugged her, he said. Not right away, at the end. How was she? I asked. Honest, he said. For once. Sometimes that is the best report a family can hope for. As for me, I continued doing what I had always done. I went to work. I helped children find words, sounds, confidence, breath. I sat with a 6-year-old girl who had stopped speaking after a traumatic accident and waited with her through weeks of silence until one afternoon she whispered, "Mom." Her mother fell apart. I wrote the progress note with tears in my eyes. Patient produced spontaneous verbalization in response to maternal presence. Clinical language never captures the miracle, but it preserves the evidence that the miracle happened. That is what I think about now when people ask why I documented everything. Documentation is not cold. It is care with a spine. It says this happened. These words were spoken. This line was crossed. This truth will not be smothered later by someone else's version of events. Amelia is 5 now. Her curls are still copper, wild, impossible to tame. She calls them her dragon hair. Vivian once told her during a supervised visit at our house, "I had hair like that when I was little." Amelia gasped as if Vivian had revealed she could fly. "You did," Vivian nodded. Her eyes moved to me briefly, then back to Amelia. "I did. I hid it for a long time because I didn't understand it was beautiful." Amelia touched one of her own curls and said, "That's silly." Vivian smiled sadly. "Yes," she said, "it was." I do not know what our family will look like 10 years from now. I do not know whether Vivian will become someone safe enough to trust more deeply. I do not know whether Julian will want a close relationship with all of us or simply a truthful one. I do not know whether Thomas and Vivian's marriage will survive the full weight of what was hidden. But I know this. The night Vivian tried to expose me, she exposed the architecture of her own fear. She showed us how shame travels when no one stops it. She showed us how a secret can become a lens through which a person misreads everyone else. And she showed my husband, finally, that peace built on silence is not peace. It is delayed damage. The cream-colored folder is still in my desk drawer. I keep it with the lab email, the screenshots, Priya's letter, and Vivian's apology. Not because I live in the past, because some objects remind you of the moment you stopped begging people to believe you and started letting the truth stand on its own. Here is what I learned. The people who keep demanding proof from you are often terrified of the evidence inside their own lives. The ones who call themselves protectors may only be protecting their secrets. And when someone tries to turn your child, your marriage, or your dignity into a courtroom, you do not have to scream to win. Sometimes you prepare, you document, you wait. And when they slide the folder across the table, you let them open it. That dinner was supposed to be my ending. Instead, it became the first honest page of our family's story. So if this story reminded you to trust your instincts, protect your peace, and stop shrinking under someone else's suspicion, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment with your thoughts, subscribe to After Silence Stories, and I'll see you in the next episode.